Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the Township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Good evening. Welcome to the East Lampeter Township Planning Commission meeting. I'm Darrell Seesholz, current chair of the Planning Commission, and present this evening with us to my far left, Jerry Huskin, Sally Ryder, Randy Patterson, myself, Jason Dagan, Colin Seesholz, Alicia Hare.
He did so well.
And I went blank, I'm sorry. Dave Sinopoli. I've known him too long, so that's the problem. We also have three individuals in the audience, and as we get to their topics this evening, they will introduce themselves with the appropriate item on the agenda. First item, now that we're introducing, everybody can hear. I believe we have a couple people online. We have one person online. And they're connected. Okay, great. With that, first item will be Pledge Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item, being our first meeting of this calendar year, it's reorganization of the Planning Commission. With that being the case, I will open the floor and look for a nomination for chair of the Planning Commission for this coming year.
So I would nominate Darrell Seesholz as chair for this coming year. I did ask.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, I'll close the nominations for chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Next is vice chair, nomination for vice chair.
I'll nominate Randy Patterson for vice chair.
We have Randy Patterson nominated for vice chair. Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, I'll close the nominations for vice chair. Do I have a second for the vice chair nomination? I have a second. Nominations now for secretary.
Just in order of seniority, I would nominate Sarah Ryder as secretary.
Thank you.
She's willing to accept.
Sarah's been nominated for secretary. Are there any other nominations for secretary? Hearing none, close the nominations for secretary. Do I have a second for that nomination? Thank you. So the officers for East Lampeter Township Planning Commission, the slate that's been identified would be Chair Darrell Cecils, Vice Chair Randy Patterson, and Secretary Sarah Ryder. All those in favor indicate by yay and raising your right hand.
Aye.
Any opposing? None. So be it. Those will be the new officers for 2022. Thank you.
Just a question for clarification. I don't have to do minutes or anything like that, right? I don't have to do minutes.
It's a fine time.
Okay, yeah, it's like, I'm going to withdraw my own.
You didn't until you asked. That sounded like a volunteer.
No, it was not. It is certainly not.
You can thank Alicia for taking,
Thanks, Alicia.
and Colin for doing that. And now that we're recording the meetings on record as well, so.
I once had to be a secretary and had to do that. And it was not fun.
So, next item, approval of the minutes of the November 9th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. We each have those. There was a updated version provided this evening for each of you. There were a couple additions made or typos that were taken care of from the item, from the piece that was in your packet earlier and online. So,
Sorry, I don't have the updated ones. Was it? Sorry.
oh, yeah,
Thank
some
you.
grammatical. Basically, we added Mr. McEwen, who was missed in the first paragraph as being present at the meeting. And then the date at the very end of the next planning commission meeting was corrected to December 14th.
Okay.
And just as a note, we didn't meet in December. So we're approving the November meeting minutes this evening, since that's the next meeting since our last meeting in November. Other than that, there were no other changes to the document, to my knowledge. Okay. So having reviewed those, I'll look for a motion to approve the November 9th.
So moved.
We have a motion. Any discussion? None, I'll look for a second.
Second.
And the second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes. Any opposed or abstaining? No opposed or abstaining. Thank you. Okay. Old business, none this evening. Under new business, first item is Plan 2021-27 Quarry View Shop, final land development plan. Good evening. I believe the mic's on. We're good. Okay, if you could use that. Thank you. I interrupted you. Yeah.
My name is Mark Hackelberg, Principal and Landscape Architect with Arts and S Associates. On the meeting attendance this evening is Jake Krieger. Jake's Landscape Architect who's worked on this project with me. Jake is having some health challenges. He can't drive at the moment, but he's here in case we need technical support. So I'll make that reference to the guy on the screen.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Jake. And Colin, Jake had tried to send a PDF of this document, but apparently file sizes didn't allow that to come through. So I'll just refer to the rendering that's over here to the right-hand side. This is a project that some of you may recall. This was about a year ago, perhaps February, March of last year. We had been before both the Planning Commission and supervisors regarding the adaptive reuse of a property. It's basically just opposite the travel plaza east of 896 and the Rockvale outlets. This is a old farmstead that's been dilapidated for years. I should say dilapidated, it's been vacant for years. There have been a number of other proposals on this particular site. I think the most recent of which was maybe 5 or 7 years ago, proposing a hotel use. Basically, this is a property that is in the agricultural zoning district. And there is a provision in the ordinance that allows the adaptive reuse of historic structures subject to proof that they are in fact historic and subject to approval of conditional use by the supervisors. We spent several months working through technical matters with the supervisors on that particular concept, and we actually have presented conditional use here, presented before conditional use here back in April of this past year. At that point in time, the supervisors did in fact determine that the adaptive reuse of the project did in fact preserve the historic structures. The structures were determined through a number of consultants involved that the structures are in fact historic resources. And so we're basically here before you tonight to consider the land development plans associated with the adaptive reuse of the building. And I'll point to, take the microphone with me, but I'll give you a little bit of a heads up about what's being proposed. There are a number of appendages to the existing barn. The barn was built in 1911. The core of the barn is basically what is intended to be preserved. The series of appendages that were added through the mid part of the 19th or 20th century are being removed back to what was the original structure in 1911. The farmhouse is being preserved, and there's actually an in-law quarters that is of historic significance that is also being preserved. What is being proposed is a link between the two, and the intent is that this land use would actually comprise the corporate offices for Core Review Building Group. Core Review Building Group specializes in historic structures. They view this as a real signature type of work that they do. And the building that's being proposed is basically being proposed to store trucks, equipment, materials, storage. So part of the application for the project was related to a contractor storage yard. And in essence, the storage yard is going to be contained entirely within the structures within the building. So that was a decision that was a part of the conditional use proceedings. Ben King, the owner of Core Review Building Group, has joined us as well. So by way of background, that's the context of what's happening with what's intended to happen with the existing structures. They've already begun some demolition and restoration work is underway through the demolition permits they've already obtained Township, but obviously we're here to consider the land development plans associated with this. So what is being considered is what you're basically seeing here in represented on this particular drawing. This is about a 5.13 acre parcel. There is proposed for dedication a portion of frontage along the Route 30 corridor, the Lincoln Avenue or Lincoln Highway corridor. And there's a waiver related to that. And I'll get into some of the details of that as we discussion. But But what's being proposed is basically what is now gravel and circulation around the structures is intended to be improved with 17 parking spaces, paved surface areas, as well as improved access and some retaining walls at the back of the structure to allow reasonable grades for the movement of materials, tow motors, that kind of thing into the structure, as well as circulation around the proposed storage building itself. So the storage building is actually intended to be constructed into and it's designed based on the premise of a tobacco storage shed. The adaptive reuse and conditional use discussions recognize that fitting in context and fitting in the context of the neighborhood and surrounding land uses was consistent with the intentions of the adaptive reuse of these structures for an alternate purpose. So that conditional use decision has been established. The other elements that I can share with you, we have submitted to PennDOT for highway occupancy permit. Those drawings have been forwarded to PennDOT. We're working through technical details of geometry, circulation, types of trucks that will be using this property. One of the elements of the conditional use decision was the 2.5 acres of the 5 acre property. Basically, the left-hand side of the property, western side of the property, retained in agricultural land use. Mr. King and his family are in fact considering, and there was an amendment to our plan since it was originally filed. They are intending to establish a small farm stand on this property. It relates to some of the clean and green history of back taxes related to this property. So as long as they can produce revenue and small farm stand revenue off of that portion of the property, they're in the process of right now working with the tax assessment office regarding that clean and green prior determination. So we're working through those details. But what I can tell you is that as a result of our application, and I know there's some comments related to the issue of farm stand, we can and will comply with the requirements of the farm stand. We're required that basically what Ben is intending is a movable, mobile temporary cart table, roughly 50 square feet. We're not talking about a big, massive farm stand, but enough to basically support the agricultural, the small agricultural area, 2.5 acres that they'll have in residual use on the property. So that is part of our application. The parking capacity for the project accommodates the 2 spaces that are necessary for that small farm stand. What we will do is we will show an approximate location of that farm stand, but it will not be a year-round permanent fixture on the property. We have included it in stormwater calculations so we can justify and prove those details to township staff, and we'll work through that as part of the questions that were last raised by the last review. We have 2 stormwater management facilities on the property. One sits in the back, the other in the front, with relatively flat property. And basically, this is largely an infiltration. Both are largely infiltration facilities. The front area has some soils in it, and basically what we're trying to do is contain, adding some impervious cover as a result of the paved surfaces area, but we're containing discharge in the 2 drainage sheds that already exist on the property. So we have one technical detail that we have to work through with staff on this back one. And the other thing I'll also say is that our plans do contain the entire Stolzfus property. And part of the reason the entire Stolzfus property is a part of this application, it largely relates to the fact that there's an exchange easement that's taking place in land use associated with these 2 properties. This is a temporary, I shouldn't say temporary, this is a permanent easement granted for the use of access and stormwater management. This property owner will retain the rights and responsibilities for maintenance and operation of those facilities. In exchange, the farmer will get the opportunity to continue his agricultural fields and operations that Mr. Stolzfus currently maintains here on the western side of the property. It's a like exchange for the intended uses of the 2 parcels. That has agreement in place with Mr. Stolzfus that our client's counsel has worked on with their counsel. So that's the background of the project. For any details or any questions about the history and what's being proposed. About the use.
I just have one question.
Sure.
Where is the farm stand proposed to be located? I missed that.
So the farm stand would be, by ordinance, needs to be located behind the front yard setback but can occur within the front of the building. So it would generally be somewhere in this vicinity. The parking spaces that we, would logically be available or for that use would be located in this area. So our intent is that the farm stand would be located in the front,
Okay.
in the front of the parking, but not out in that setback area. That's the one primary restriction in that second.
Mhm.
And the farm stand is permitted by use in the agricultural district. So we know we have to address the technical defense with staff.
Yeah. I'm sorry, if I could jump in real quick. I don't believe farm stand is permitted on this property, and I think I had correspondence with either Ben or Jake, but because this is not 10 acres, which is what a farm is considered, a farm stand would not be permitted here. Correct. So yeah, I do not believe that the farm stand is permitted. And I did have correspondence with Ben and or Jake, so.
You clear on that, Ben?
Yeah, we did have
Okay.
I guess where we were going with that. We have more. Piece of revenue, but over 10,000 a year. That's another.
Yeah, I think for tonight, though, we should focus on the plan and not any future use. That'll have to come back for another conditional use and or zoning hearing board relief at that time. We'll have to discuss that. So I think for tonight, there should not be any discussion regarding a farm stand being that it's not permitted.
My misunderstanding. You know what I just said. On that topic.
Our thinking was mainly just that. 2.5 acres is basically going to. That's part of the conditional. Part of the thought process is that. They can stipulate that. 2.5 acres of agricultural use. That could be part of the.
It gets into a whole other use on the property, which has its own regulations. So yeah, for tonight, it should not be a park because it's not permitted.
Yeah, so as Ben had indicated, I wasn't aware that those conversations had taken place. So if we do need variances, and we do need relief for the farm stand, that's a whole nother avenue we may need to pursue. But at this point in time, as Colin mentioned, the other uses we do have conditions approved before, which really don't affect the purpose cover, the drainage, all the other others of the implications. So if at some point in time they do intend to pursue the farm stand use, it would require an amendment to the conditional use and perhaps. We would still request consideration of the land development plan, but for the exception and exclusion of the farm stand discussions. So I will, I'll focus on DMA's letter of January the 7th. And I'll basically say that there are 6 modifications in your zoning or modification that are waiver relief matters that have been requested associated with the project. I will say that one of them we're going to ask to be withdrawn, and it was really an interpretation matter, and that is related to. You have DMA's comment letter. Are you working from that?
Yes.
Okay. That is item number 6, and it relates to parking space.
Mark,
Yeah.
excuse me. I think based on the farm stand discussion, we're going to have to request to keep that on as a request for the parking.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah, so this matter relates to staff discussions early on in the project where there was a desire for more parking spaces than was required based on ordinance provisions for the types of uses being proposed. So we're proposing 17 parking spaces on the project. If 2 of them were required for the farm stand, this requirement would not apply. We're still proposing 17 parking spaces, so we exceed the 125% threshold. I think it's 127. If I remember the calculation correctly, Jake. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 130. We exceed the required parking by 130%. Anything over 125 requires approval of this particular provision by the supervisor. So we're asking for approval of this particular provision, subject to supervisor's acknowledgement. It's not really, it's noted as a modification, it's really subject to the discretion of supervisor. It's in the zoning, so there's no real need. So that is item number 6 on the DMA. Any questions on that?
Just Mark, and your revised RDSs by December 17th, you
Yeah.
told us what you have, your request expanded to 150%. So asking to have what you have proposed, or are you asking for the modification to give you up to 150%?
I think we were asking for it to be calculated up to 150% because we weren't settled on exactly the number of parking spaces. As it's calculated, it's 130. The request, as long as staff is okay with the 17 parking spaces that we're proposing, we'll accept it at 30.
Well, sorry, Mark, I think we would still request the 150 just because of the change in parking, again, for the farm stand.
I see your point. In case we need to have the extra spaces and that can be this year. Let's keep it at 150 if you're fine considering. I'm hopeful we'll get this matter resolved before we get to the supervisor. And you will notice there is a difference. The numbering in the DMA letter is not consistent with the waiver letter. that was submitted. So, I'll try to cross-reference it.
Yeah.
So that particular, that in particular is one matter. I will, if you want me to refer to the RTS letter, the amendment.
DMA, yes.
So modification number 1, the DMA letter, is preliminary plan. We're asking, and the ordinance basically allows us to subject to approval. We're asking that the plan be considered preliminary plan to acknowledge the condition that is suggested by staff that we comply with all preliminary plan requirements. The nature of the plan is one lot. It's basically so we're asking consideration of file as a plan. We'll take them individually or we read them.
Any discussion on that one? No. On this side? Okay. We're good for number 2, the DMA.
So number 2 in the DMA letter is actually number
4.
4. Yes. 4 in your request. This particular request relates to curbing on both sides of the street. The applicant or the application of this topic relates to both the Stolz's property and this property because they are in fact both property parties of the application. So what we are asking is the curbing, waiver of curbing on the interior of the property, flat condition, drainage, really trying to deal with the internal drainage and runoff. Curbing becomes a barrier to surface runoff on this site. So we're asking for relief when we enter the site. We don't have major circulation challenges on the internal portion of the property. I think the bigger issue is that we're asking for relief regarding curbing improvements along the entire frontage of the property. Now, the ordinance does acknowledge agricultural lands not being required to install curbing. Staff's recommendation is for a denial of but for a deferral for the frontage improvements. And as we looked at the corridor, I think this is really kind of a philosophical matter where the goal and intent of this property is to, at least as we discussed it with the supervisors, for this portion of this segment of Route 30 to retain its agricultural character as you approach the Route 30 corridor of the commercial segments up in Rockville for the west. This area of the township to retain that character doesn't make sense that you would curb this corridor if it's intended to be retained in that condition. That's our request. We maintain our request for the complete waiver of the requirement, we do acknowledge staff's recommendation. So I'll ask for consideration of that.
And that's kind of a two-part, because approximately half of the site is the Stolfos agricultural, is that correct?
Yeah.
To the west?
Yeah.
So that, to some intent, being an agricultural use would be exempt. So to some degree, if the
I'm not
deferral,
quite sure that the staff is seeing it that way. I think they're looking at this property, the 5 acres, as being.
for the entire, okay.
Which is the whole frontage. Is it the whole frontage?
Yeah, the whole frontage of what you're seeing here. This
Okay.
closest farm actually extends further to the east, which is a party to this application largely because we're proposing improvements on that. So it opens.
So you're asking for a waiver of the curbing in the, just the frontage that you talked about, not beyond, right? You,
Correct.
that's not a
Right,
requirement
because it's not
beyond,
a requirement.
Yeah, okay.
Just with this.
just that, okay.
Two parts, we're asking for it internally, and then the
Mhm.
second part, asking for the entire frontage. The second part is the piece that staff is recommending. And, again, I think this is, in my mind, it's philosophical decisions around what the future of this segment of Route 30 is intended to be long term.
Is there any curbing anywhere else in this area, like on the other side of the street?
On the other side of the street, there's commercial.
Yeah, so it's curbed over there, okay.
The truck plaza is, and further down Turkey Hill is the new solar project is, yeah.
But not on this side of the street, there's nothing until you get
to
further
the
down.
intersection.
Okay,
Yeah, like Scottish and that whole segment down, none of those properties.
on the same side of the street, what was the, Lancaster gas station, that's now vacant. I'm trying to recall, is it at the intersection?
Yeah, yes.
So there's curbing
Yeah,
there,
and that the,
and it comes to the golf, the mini golf.
can't say for sure. What it-
You know, I'm not sure either if it's there. Okay. Yeah, as you're saying, it's kind of philosophical. It's hard to tell where this may end up. And the deferral is, if ever in the future changes, it may be important, may not be. It may never happen. The
Yeah.
challenge is it puts the owner in limbo that 15 years from now, it may be needed. Or 5 years or 2 years, but it, or never. So, yeah. Okay.
So that's. Number 3 is related to maximum loading ratios. The maximum loading ratio matter is very specific regarding the 2 stormwater facilities. We had submitted a geotechnical analysis from our geotechnical consultant. Because of the small amount of drainage that's actually getting to these areas, they were supportive of the recommendations and staff is supporting that.
Just for clarification, what exactly is the waiver request? To just waive the maximum loading ratio?
Yeah, it's sort of the maximum loading ratios to the percentages that are recommended by the plan. And honestly, both of them are different. Their position was that they're shallow facilities, broken based on the soil types and broken soil types. They weren't concerned about, we're in a non-parched area, so they weren't concerned about the potentially people within reasonable loading requirements. So.
Yeah, the only reason I asked is in DM's letter, it doesn't really say what you're asking to waive. Unless I'm not reading it
No,
correctly.
it did go into detail. I read it in
It's in your letter.
in the geotechnical.
DMA letter just says we recommend action on this request be granted, but it doesn't say what the request was. That's why I was asking for clarification.
If you would like us to clarify what it's granted for, the degree of differences, we can apply that and state that as part of our plan. That's
I'm just thinking about motions.
yeah.
So you're adding a requirement of both the 3-1 and 5-1 be waived.
I would say consistent with the recommendations of the project's technical.
Okay.
If there is a letter of support that defines Jake, do you remember is that sufficient, Randy? Do you
Yeah,
want dates?
no, that's fine. That's
I have the numbers if that was helpful. BMP 1 is 16.6 to 1. BMP 2 is 100.2 to 1.
And part of the reason those are so high is the isolated areas that are dealing with a small amount of water that's actually getting to them. So those are the reasons.
Thank you.
Okay. Next one is plant scale. We're proposing our plans at 30 scale, fifth sheet size is legible. Seems to be simple and pretty straightforward. So we're asking for a modification. Staff support. And number 5 relates to right of way. So the Lincoln Highway East is classified as a principal arterial roadway. Principal arterial roadway classifications in the township require 100-foot right of way. 100-foot right of way, look at the sort of fabric of the corridor. Makes sense when you're up in the west of B97. You've got center turn lanes, you've got two travel lanes both directions. When you get down to this segment, we talked to staff about this, and I think this is consistent with what had been done on the solar project down the street. On the opposite side, there's a 30-foot right of way. So for us to actually grant the full remainder would have brought rights of way back, significantly impacting the project. I had no geometrical consistency with the rest of the board. So we're asking for relief that was consistent with the rights of way that would be apparent along the segment. So we are proposing our remaining portion of the 30-foot right of way. That's the plan strip.
I think, Mark, you're showing on the plan with the 60-foot right of way, that line right in front of the building is the building setback based on the 60,
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's correct.
So that would
It would create.
put the existing building within the right of way and not give you the proper
Well,
setback.
And there's no consistency then when you look at the 20 properties that you have a right of way, sort of out of juxtaposition. And then number 6, we previously talked about regarding so those are the, and again, I don't think that one takes, it takes a recommendation, I think, to the supervisors. That's a decision to make. It's not necessary. Staff is supporting that. So you want to take waivers before we talk about anything else? Or how do you want to proceed, Carol?
Are there any
Yeah, I guess we should answer any other questions. Right now.
on the waivers?
Staff.
We can come back. The only last one is, depending on the decision, they all have to, the approval, date of approvals, et cetera, have to be put on the plan. It was the last item in the PMA letter under modifications and waivers. There are 6 zoning issues, comments. We can't give relief here to that you need to address with the zoning officer and resolve those. And one of those items 5 is the farm stand. I think we've had some discussion on that. So that's either going to be with the zoning officer or the zoning hearing board, depending on determination of what level of attention that requires by the township.
Yeah, and I'm happy to just give you a quick snippet if that's helpful. If you just want to skip over these, that's entirely up to you.
If you want, just as far as this side, any motion that may be made tonight will not include the farm stand, any approval or rejection or anything. That's on this side, I believe, but depends on the motion. That'll be an item for future discussion, separate from this evening's plan and action that might be taken. Even though it's in the letter, it won't be part of our action tonight. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Is there anything specific you want to reference in those?
I'll just basically, number one, I think is we have included some permits or calculations. I'm not sure if they were, if there's a coordination issue there, we'll work through that particular issue with staff, but I'm not concerned about the outcome of that. So, number two, we do have, I have a draft of a note that we intend to include that addresses the details of the historic, the history around the historic buildings and the actions that were taken as part of the conditional use decision that we are proposing to be added to the Township project. And I think that will clarify the staff as well. Number three actually refers to a detail on our plan sheet that is basically a joint details, the construction joint details for the concrete sidewalk. So I'm not quite sure the details of that, but again, I think staff we can get interpretation of that specific detail on our sheet. So clarify that. Existing proposed dumpsters, there is the existing dumpster enclosure that's intended behind the building. The ordinance requires some more detail regarding drop pins and materials. We have to look at those with that and the details of that. We'll be back to the staff to take that compliance as well. Number 5, farm stand. We'll refer the entire number 5, page 5, so special. And number 6, there was a slight change in the overall footprint of the building addition. There's additional 247 square feet of office space. It requires bumpers from 5 to 6 required parking spaces. Again, we're still within the required number of spaces within the total 14 required, close to 17. So we're still alive with the parking requirements. So we'll work through those details of zoning with staff. I think we can address all of them. The subdivision and land development comments, I'll just run down through these. We are in agreement with all of these, accepting all of these comments as conditions of approval. Item number 1 is the highway permanent plans or process. There's some clarification regarding tax records and identification of a couple of parcels as it relates to item number 2. We'll do some more research on that one, make sure we get that down to staff satisfaction. Number 3, certificate for approvals from proper authorities. We did receive some comments from the sewer authority. Water is private water system. But we do have 2 matters we need to clarify on the plans for the sewer authority related to grinding pump and the height of any casement of the top of that grinding pump. So minor details that staff in that process of addressing that concern. Item number 4, we need to submit a cost financial security to do that to get it's finalized. Number 5 is related to hash easements. And I think the issue here, if I understand staff's comment sort of correctly, we identify the easements, but we don't identify the rights and responsibilities. They're identified in the agreement, but they're not clear on the plan. We will add appropriate notes and details regarding the exchange of rights and responsibilities. So that the rights are clear and consistent. Number 6 is related to parking open space. Colin and I had a brief conversation beforehand. Basically, the calculation of parking open space amounts to 5,600 square feet total required parking open space. We are proposing fee in lieu of dedication or planter siding on the topic, so we need to make sure that plan dedication and I agree with the fee amount that's required for the grant.
And that's a discussion with the supervisors on that amount.
Yeah, I think part of their point was we had had discussions about the need to pay a fee. We haven't done the calculation. So. So number 7 relates to submissions to the police, fire, and EMS. We have received responses from police and fire. Ben has been in some communication with the fire chief over the intent to place a knock box on the property to maintain access to the buildings if they need to. We have not received anything from the EMS as yet. We just submitted that information separately. So we're still excited for the response. So again, I mentioned we accept all those conditions of approval. The last one, there is had been some exchanges today regarding details regarding this one stormwater basin, stormwater facility, that our engineers are back that exchange communication, come to complete resolution. I'm confident that we can. So we're not standing still have to accept that as condition. So with that, I'll ask if you have any other questions and acknowledge the farm stand discussion will be delayed.
Yeah, I think pretty much items, the 7 subdivision land development, the 1 stormwater management or some housekeeping things. And from my standpoint, I think the recommendation would be to clean up as most all those, if not all, of them, before you go to the supervisors, or have documentation referencing where you're at with those. I think that appears what's been missing here is.
Yeah, there have been complications, but sometimes little projects have carries heavy weights.
So, they all have that. Okay. We do have comments from Lancaster County planning staff.
Yeah, so the county comments were supportive of the project's intentions. They asked, questioned the impact of trees. And unfortunately, where the driveway and some of the improvements needed to occur on the property, and also the aging condition of some of the trees, the vast majority of the vegetation of the property does unfortunately have to come down. And we've had some conversations with Ben about those intentions. The project doesn't require a landscape plan, but we've had some conversations about establishing some additional landscape improvements on the property. And the recommendation was needed vegetation.
Yeah, and the other was just the signature block for the planning department. So what you can do. Yeah, the trees, they're recommending that you save as many as you can. Now, if there's a tree outside the office, maybe you want to keep that for. Yeah, but and that's a recommendation I think here, which I support, is selectively look. Don't just clear them all, but selectively. There's something you keep.
One of the more significant challenges with this, I think Jake could attest to it, is handicap accessibility. In order to achieve the handicap accessibility, we need to raise the grades. To get our ramps at certain elevations, what happens is you end up having to fill a portion of the site in front of the house. So it's always a double-edged sword.
No.
How to solve those problems.
There's tree wells.
There are tree wells.
There's ways to address those. And that's the recommendation, I think, is look at the options of being able to save what you can. And if not, then a planting plan with native material would be a recommendation. Yeah. So. Questions from this side? Comments? What you're showing us, Mark, and there are other existing structures on the property. There's another, I don't know, exactly 2 to 4 buildings that are being removed. They were all supervisors, I know, said 2.5 acres had to stay in agricultural use. What's not being shown there are acceptable be removed by the previous approval. I don't know specifically what was included in that, but in the front of the existing barn, the barn that's to the far east, there were 2 other structures. And I know from our last discussions, those were added after the original building and they weren't as historic or as usable. And those are acceptable be removed
Yes.
according to the previous approval.
That is, the plan that's before you is consistent with what was represented. in the supervisor's report. There was a block milk house that appendage on the east end of the building, or the east end of the main barn. There was actually a barn that was built, a portion of the barn built on the front. You have the first wall. Appendages. It's actually a term of articles with but those newer additions are being represented as being removed.
There wasn't where the new building's going in the back. There was a structure there before, right?
Yeah, so there was a smaller block building that is actually situated roughly in this location right here. Actually, it sits right back here. So that's a newer block building that was removed. There was an addition, a newer addition over the side of this house that was being removed. Actually, yeah, I guess on both sides. So this new addition right here actually removes the newer addition. I think that was added. This was the newer addition that you're taking on. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, this is indicative of the plan that was represented as part of the. The other, there had been a block structure that was sitting out here. A small shed. Oh, is that still there? But it is intended.
Thank you. I suggest maybe you include that in the presentation when you get to the supervisors, that you are consistent with their conditional approval with what's proposed on this plan, since we just have the proposal and not the existing. Okay.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Showing that the conditions as opposed.
Yeah, it's your acknowledgement of the conditions and also a refresher for them, but it was, yeah. Other comments? Questions? Any comments from the audience? I believe Jake's still the only one online. So, if not, I'll look for a motion for the plan before us.
I'll take a stab at it.
Thank you.
Make a motion that plan number 2021-27, the land development plan for the, oh, sorry, picked up the wrong one. That's it. for the quarry view shop. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Be recommended to the Township Board of Supervisors for approval with the modifications and waivers requested in RGS letter dated September 30th, 2020, revised December 17th, 2021, stipulated in DMA's letter dated January 7th, 2022, including the submission of final plan as opposed to a preliminary plan, including the deferral of curbing requirements, including the waiver of existing maximum loading ratios being granted to those stipulated in the plan, and to include granting up to 150% maximum for total number of spaces, as well as those zoning comments, and with the understanding that comment number 5 be removed and delayed, and subdivision and land development and stormwater management comments be agreed to by the applicant. Did I miss anything?
For the curbing, just for clarification, you said deferral curbing.
Mhm.
There's 2 parts to that. One is the deferral, which I assume you're saying for Route 30.
Route
Then there's
30
also the curbing,
being granted for.
so a
parking.
waiver be granted for the parking and not a
Yeah.
deferral.
Yes.
Just a clarification, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
But a
you.
deferral for 30. A deferral for the 30.
Referral for the frontage, waiver of the interior.
Yes.
And then would you like to include the county
And
comment?
yes,
As
I'll
part of
include the county planning commission comments related to landscaping and plan signature blocks. We'll try to take a stab at it.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye and right hand up.
Aye.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, all in agreement for approval of that motion. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And
You guys, behind the project, you can't be here.
well,
It's been fine.
yeah,
Appreciate your attention to the project and the process with the staff. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Next item under new business is Plan 2021-30 Green Leaf Plants, Final Land Development Plan.
My name is Tom. I'm with RGS Associates. We just got to see my boss. And now it's my turn. What you're seeing here is a quick rendering of the green leaf plants property. Certainly, every single one of you are well aware, driven past and seen it. What we're showing here on the plan, if you see in blue, is what we're proposing. It's infill of greenhouse there on the southern side, and then a larger multi-tract greenhouse on the northern side of the property. There's 2 green areas that we're showing that you can see just north of the building buildings in the north, and then just south of the building to the south, a small stormwater facility. Just a minor area to make sure that we're managing that vision, the impervious that we're showing. So you guys would have been introduced to the project back in November as a briefing. We had a lot of back and forth with engineers, David Miller, and gotten the letter down to something pretty simple, as you'll see tonight. But just kind of a quick rundown of the project. What you're seeing here is a long-term project that started back quite a while ago. But I didn't have a full-size printout of it. This is a copy of the plan from 1997. You can see what I have listed in yellow is actually what is out there now. And what we're showing today is what we're proposing to bring in. You can see it was substantially larger to the west, and much closer to the western property line. At that time, the stormwater was designed. Permanent ordinance, obviously, stormwater ordinance have changed significantly over the years. So one of the things that we're dealing with here is some additional stormwater work. There is some maintenance that's going to happen to some of the other facilities that are existing out there right now. That shows up really well with erosion and sedimentation control plans versus land development plans that you guys are seeing. We have this some long delay. We have gotten some good feedback from the conservation district. We are on technical review with them at this point. But they have not had any significant comments to date. So what we're looking at here is a fairly small project in terms of the site itself. And one thing I did want to bring up, per the 1997 plan, there was a variance that was approved for the property, which allowed for, make sure I get my percentages correct here, a max building coverage of 35%. We are in the ag zone. Previously, in 1997, this was zoned. It was zoned rural residential. So that allowed some higher density. When the 97 plan was approved, along with the chemo variance, it allowed for a higher percentage of the impervious coverage. We're still well within that range with this plan, obviously, but I just wanted to bring that up, just kind of get you guys up to speed with the project and where things are today. I did say some of the items that we're working on here. One more thing that we're getting back up to speed with the 1997 plan is landscape buffering. I think the majority of it went in, but not all of it went in. So we're trying to get back in compliance with that. So the land development plans that you guys have in front of you do have some additional landscaping that will buffer between Old Pike and City. So going to the comment letter from David Miller was received on the 6th. It went down through the beginning, just kind of go over the waivers and applications that we requested. There were 5 items that we requested. Number 1 was a waiver of the preliminary plan. It's a pretty simple plan. We can condense it all into the simplified prelim final or final plan at this point. So that was item number 1. Item number 2 was for street reconstruction around the perimeter. Being that the project is in fact fairly small, and knowing that Mount Sydney is in fact actually wider than what the requirements are, and also with Philadelphia Pike, the majority of it already hits your minimum requirements. There might be a short section to the west that might be there, but we have requested that waiver in the letter. They did request a deferral of that. Still have it listed as a modification right now, until you guys make a determination of that. And we have on the most current plan included a different, should that be the direction that the board ultimately decides to go. Number 3 has to do with curbing along the perimeter. Again, this is a huge property, so to curb this would be fairly significant. There is not a lot of curbing in the area. Again, it's an agricultural property. Commercial, it is a commercial greenhouse, but it is an agricultural use. So again, we asked for a waiver of that. Staff did request a deferral. Yeah. Leave that waiver on the table just and ask for some direction. Should you guys request a deferral be acceptable to that? Should you require that? Number 4, again, is sidewalks along the perimeter. And it's a significantly long frontage, both Mount Sidney and on Old Philadelphia Pike. Our frontage of Mount Sidney, dead ends basically at the bridge. It's really, we can't cross the bridge. So that use would really be, it would be useless. Possibly from the access drive south to the bank property is the only section there that would be viable. And then the entire length of Old Philadelphia Pike. Again, they're both state roads. The likelihood that a sidewalk, that PennDOT would request that a sidewalk go in is unlikely, but the request was made. Staff preferred a deferral, but leave that on the table as well. And then number 5 is the BMP loading ratio. Very similar discussion that you just heard. Based on our geotechnical study, their reports and their recommendations, we are exceeding your ordinance. And I do have those ratios should you need them. Again, it's the 3-to-1, 5-to-1. For BMP number 1, we're at 13.8-to-1 and 20.9-to-1. The second BMP is 9.8-to-1 and 49.4-to-1. Again, they're both very small stormwater facilities. They're collecting a large portion of really just the new greenhouses. So they're hitting a little bit more on the impervious, and specifically because we are managing these buildings. And then the last item under that again is the updating the code page, things like that. Obviously, we can find that. Going into the last, I think it's the last 3 items, which are pretty simple. Financial security. We have provided a cost opinion. I've reached out to Scott at TMA asking a question about one item. We're going to comply with it. So I just wanted some clarification specifically on the MOT and how you guys want that addressed. But we'll get that in next week. Number 2 is the revised planting plan. He was questioning. There's 3 trees that are located inside the fenced area, which is they have a growing area. And they would have to be located right there because of the stormwater facility. Right now, we're going to say we're complying with it. Should we determine that we need maybe a different species or we need to shift a location, obviously we'll come back to staff and to DMA to get that confirmation. And then number 3 is really, it's a labeling typo. We want to make sure that we're perfectly clear on what that right of way is out along Old Philadelphia Pike. So that is this project kind of start to finish. It is a pretty small project in terms of scope here. Just keep in mind that deferral item, we started looking at costs. The cost of what we're saying we'll be deferring is triple the cost of what the actual project is taking. So just from that standpoint. So kind of lay that out in front of you guys. Are there any questions?
The south side of the building there, the 3 that they have listed, the ones down there.
Yes.
There's nothing there right now.
Currently, it's just gravel.
So there's just 3 on the left-hand side, and then there's like a vacant spot before the. Okay.
That's correct. Yes. Right now, I think it's just outdoor storage.
Okay.
So we just fill those, let's fix that. And then actually everything in the back is gravel as well, except for one small little corner. We expand gravel. It gives you 50 to 75 square foot area. Is the additional area.
And when was the rest of this built? Was that 97?
Plan room was 97. When the rest of it built out. Yeah. 397.
And at that time, sorry.
Oh, no,
And
go
at
ahead.
that time, there was no like requirement for the curbing, the sidewalks. Is that,
Thank you.
is that your question?
That was one of them, but
Oh.
thank you.
Yeah. So I was just curious, like, was that part of the approvals back then, or
With the
was
1997 plan, there were waivers for everything internal.
everything?
So all the curbing, internal. So exactly what those were. The waivers that were approved in 1997 included preliminary plan, curbing in parking compounds, sidewalks along streets, sidewalks along parking compounds, and then also a 24-hour basis.
So the sidewalks.
You're saying they were all,
Those were waivers that were approved back in
Okay.
1997.
just with following that, I mean, this is a unique kind of agricultural area. Everything to the east is residential. We now have sheets on the other corner from the bank, which used to be a farm and a barn and prior to that. So there is some consideration now that those residents to the east, if they want to get to the sheets, and the developments occurred even to the school across the street, well, still a school, soon to be, not sure what. But it may be an activity there that may,
Maybe another commercial site too.
yeah, that could be a walk-to site potentially of interest. So this is kind of unique now, which is very different than 1997. So the consideration, I think, has changed how we approach those.
Possibly some discussion, maybe not holistically the whole site, but really from the east side here on that city, from the driveway to the north, to go, up along, because that's a fairly steep slope, it's heavily vegetated. And then you get to the woods that you can't fence.
Mhm.
So that might be a potential area to consider. And I did provide a deferral plan that we prepared and gave to staff. Maybe that's something we can talk about in terms of, that's a section that really is not ideal. Shape or form of construction standpoint. or installation standpoint.
The bridge, well, the bridge has a wider shoulder. There's also the new middle school with a new entrance off of Mount Sydney, which is all residential as well. So going Mount Sydney and Oldville, I mean, there are new considerations that might warrant curbing now that was not envisioned 20 plus years ago. Yeah. And again, the curbing is kind of a two-part again. It's the internal and the perimeter curbing.
Deferral's been the common decision on a lot of the waiver requests for curbing and sidewalks, if I remember from my school project days. So,
Yes.
but that's a consistent decision that we've been making in recent years.
Yes. There's a lot more generally in the public interest in walking, bicycling, non-vehicular transportation means to provide greater access through pedestrian access and bicycle. So sidewalks will become more important. And wider shoulders for the bicyclist as well as, But yeah, that's been more the norm of late. In the past, waivers were more the norm.
And I think sometimes when we grant the waivers, it's because we want, like, the area is going to remain agricultural, and we want to keep the road more of a, an agricultural type road versus, and not having one side be curbed and then the other side not be curved.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is somewhat of a unique,
Yeah, because it seems like it's changing. Yeah.
there's
Still a commercial development.
commercial development
This
and
section.
residential all around it. So that's a unique agricultural zone area.
Like I said, we did put that, the deferral letter, so we understand where we're located.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
We do show. That
Yeah.
obviously, if those turned over, change that waiver request.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, whatever you want to call it, this is not the typical agricultural use of Lancaster County, it's greenhouse, which is an ag, but, yeah. And it depends who you talk to. Some say greenhouses are industry.
They're feeding lots of farms.
Yeah. So, but it is agricultural or, yeah. We also have comments from Lancaster County. No, it's okay.
One thing that I missed. I don't think
Oh.
they were.
No.
significant in terms
Just notes.
Yeah, their notes. The first one's in reference to the Farmland and Forest Land Assessment Act of 1994. Excuse me, of 1974.
That's why I got confused when Mark was talking about the clean and green, because I had this, this review letter in the back of my mind.
And yeah, and the county staff now provide comments, and the county planning commission doesn't provide a review. And then just the certification block and yeah, and then the file number. So it's pretty straightforward. You wouldn't have any issue in complying with those. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
What is the total square footage? Of the new, total square footage. I think it is just under 37,000 square feet.
And what's the total square footage? Total, or what's existing right now?
Yeah, I have a square foot of 7,000. And that puts us at only 20%, 21% building.
This is within the cone of the airport.
That is correct.
So not to make an assumption, but I assume the height of these structures are not going to be an issue with what had been approved before.
Yes, there is a max height.
And you're well below the maximum height for that with the cone for the airport. Okay. I mean, it's close enough, but far enough, but it's,
I think the shipping is the small little white bump out that you see on the bottom there. That's probably the tallest structure. And these are the shorter than that, so it should be.
yeah. I assume the three in the front would mirror the ones that are existing.
Correct.
The ones in the back look large. So not that you're going to do 2-3 story greenhouses, but
Yeah, it's still going to be within the realm of everything that's out there right now.
you were showing some green in the back.
Yes.
That's some more landscaping. You just referenced the ones in the
What
front.
we're
but-
showing there is stormwater.
Oh, is that small?
So
Okay.
it's a small infiltration and water quality facility. So what comes off of this building, and the top half of this flows this way, and now should be managed here before it gets right down. So it's living there. And then the one on the bottom is really an expansion of the swale that's there now. It's going to travel down to the swale, and it's going to dump into a large flat area. Where it's, yeah, it's water quality before it passes down through.
Appears to be a good use. I think back then the question, one of the pluses for this activity on this site within the cone was the minimal number of individuals that would be on the property working. So if there was any mishap, the possibility of loss would be minimal. Not that any loss is important and critical, but
We did confirm that the new facilities are really just additional space. It's not necessarily going to be bringing additional staff. We did confirm with fire and with concern from the accessibility standpoint.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned somewhere that there would be no additional staff, no additional personnel on site. So with the additional buildings, it'd still be the same. Any other comments from this side? Comments from the audience, attendees? If not, look for a motion. On
Did
the
so well the last time.
green
Okay.
leaf plant that's at 2369 Old Philly Pike.
Sure.
I'm talking a little, give you some.
So I will make a motion that plan number 2021-30 greenleaf plants be presented to the township supervisors for approval, conditional upon the items listed in the January 5th, 2020 letter of DMA relating to waiver of preliminary plan requirements, a deferral of streets, a deferral of curb along the existing streets.
Deferral of sidewalk.
That one's next. A deferral of sidewalks along the roadway frontages, a waiver of the maximum loading ratios for volume control, and the subdivision land development comments, and the comments of the Lancaster County Planning Commission staff be acceptable and complied with by the applicant. Much easier.
Okay. We have the motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. And we have a second to the motion. Any discussion? As part of Randy's, he mentioned compliance with the DMA letter, so the documents for the deferrals, et cetera, will need to be put in place and submitted for in writing and submitted to the township, as commented here. So with that, vote. All those in favor, say aye and right hand.
Aye.
So 5 in favor. None abstained or opposed. That's that. The motions. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Next item under new business, the 2021 annual report of the Planning Commission. I believe everybody has a copy. Having read that, it's pretty straightforward under the Municipal Planning Code. The Planning Commission to submit an annual report to the supervisors by the 1st of March, and here it is. So,
I only had one question. What was the highlighted date?
with the question mark.
Are you referring
With
to
the question mark?
Yeah, the chart, that's just a courtesy we kind of submit. That's kind of a working, living document that we're constantly changing on a daily basis. So I just submitted that to kind of show you, hey, this is the total amount of plans that we worked on. So a lot of that information in there may or may not be correct or up to date. So yeah, so.
At least you do want the city to.
There were a couple items Colin and I spoke on some of them. I think a couple of things will be done. The second item, campus improvements. Who knows what that is?
Here.
Good.
It's,
I asked that they add
police.
the address, the campus
Oh.
improvements or the township campus improvements. And when I first looked at it, I'm like, I know we reviewed a plan for the township property. And then when I went back and looked, so I think they're adding the address and maybe the word township campus improvement. So we have had things from Lancaster Mennonite, we've had things from some of the schools, which are also campuses. So just to avoid any confusion and some clarity. The one I didn't mention, Colin, was item 9, BSK Real Estate. The address that's given there, that's actually what we saw this evening. That's the address of their current home office, which is item 9 on here. So that confused me a little. It says BSK Real Estate, attention Ben King, Hartman Station Road.
Correct.
That's
That's their
where his
address.
business is, his address, but that's not the location of the site. So I was just,
That's for a conditional use.
yes.
So the project that we're talking about is actually project 21/21/27, which does
Oh,
have,
yeah,
which does
yeah.
have 26 to it.
This was the conditional use review then,
Correct, yep,
right? But then 2027
number 27.
is Corey View Shop.
Correct.
They were both the same thing, but they're listed by different names. Is what I'm saying. So just, okay.
Yeah, so one of,
I was
yes.
looking for consistency, I guess.
Right, well, there's two different chart columns here. One's an applicant and one's a project name. A lot of it has to do with billing, how we do it. So that's gonna remain the same, Daryl.
Okay. So project name owner, okay. Yeah, and this actually is a little abbreviated from what we had last year. I think we had more columns last year, but we're just.
Yeah.
Is it the same?
It's the same one. I just copy paste.
Or maybe it is. Maybe it's just the way it's printed, so.
Yeah, I'm quite frankly, Daryl, I'm not sure if we're even gonna submit this chart to the Board of Supervisors. They'll definitely get your letter. But as far as all this, yeah, I'm not sure that'll be submitted to
Okay.
them.
Okay. Well, it's just maybe my OCD kicking in. Since as it ended up tonight, my name's going on it, so. Thank you. So with that, we'll look for a motion to approve the submission of the annual report to the supervisors.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Fair. And Randy has seconded that motion. All those in favor, say aye. Right hand. Thank you. So approved. That's it for our new business briefing items. Unless something new's come up, nothing. Other business, none. Announcement. Gerald or Jerry Huskin.
Jerry with a G.
Jerry with a G. Huskin has been appointed to the Planning Commission since we last met. So welcome. Glad to have you aboard. And also Jason had been, and we were notified before our last meeting, but this is his first meeting since we didn't meet in December. So this is Jason's first meeting as well. So welcome to both of you. Glad to have you on board. And we got a whole year ahead of us, so. And the meeting time of 7 appears to be working. Everybody made it. It used to be at 7:30. So at 7. One other announcement. I believe everybody got the email about the forecast meeting. I think 3 of us know what that is. If you can attend. It is very informative. You get a free breakfast, you know, such as it is. You know, you get a free breakfast. You get the free breakfast. It was all virtual last year. So you got breakfast on your own at home or wherever you zoomed in from, because there was no in person, but this year it's going to be at the school, as I understand. So you can go home.
Yeah.
In a sense, but maybe you can tell us where that room is. It's the large instruction room.
Yeah, it's right opposite the district office in the high school.
Okay. Right, opposite this district office.
Yeah, that parking, there's a parking lot, the district's office is on one side and the high school starts on the other side. There
Okay.
are doors that open there. That's the large group construction.
Okay. Well, it says we have to go in, I guess, the main entrance. So we'll have to go down to the left the whole way and.
Well, I'm not in control anymore, so. I'll
I
take it up with them.
know.
Can't you open those doors for us?
No, they took my keys
I
away.
was gonna say, you don't have a key? We'll meet
No,
you.
I do have a key to Fritz, but I have an office there.
So, but yeah, it is informative. If you have the ability to make it on that Saturday, the 5th, February 5th. Maybe interesting, if not, hearing from the fire companies and the township and what plans are. You may find out if your road's going to be paved or not this coming year, or torn, chipped, or whatever might happen. But and you'll get to see the folks that are in charge of, the various aspects of the township. So it is important. But other than that, I have no other announcements. Any other topics? Not. Look for a motion to adjourn. And the motion and a second? And we have a second. Well, that Alicia Pickwich and all those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.